Hello, greetings, worms! Tremble before me, for I am the arbiter of eternal sleep. Sleepy Via. So... Hello. Today we are going to be reading A Study in Scarlet. It is part of the Sherlock Holmes canon. One of the originals, the first one by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. For those of you who have read or know about Sherlock Holmes, you might think of it as a book, but Sherlock Holmes was actually published in these little magazine, pamphlet, newspaper things. They were serialized. They weren't all together in a novel as we know it today. Sherlock is probably my favorite book of all time. I grew up on it. I've read it over and over. Well, I've read the adventures and the memoirs over and over, the short stories. I've only read Study in Scarlet once. And there are a few by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that I have not read, so hopefully we'll get to those too. In a way, I guess this is my excuse to read the rest of the Sherlock books. We probably won't be staying for too long today, maybe just a couple hours, or I don't know how long it will take to read Study in Scarlet, or part of it. But yeah, I do need to sleep a bit early today. Can't stay up too late. You know, eternally EP. And I stayed up a little bit too much yesterday. So much that I slept until 6 p.m. and I did not have time to go grocery shopping, so I did not eat today! There's no groceries in the refrigerator. Nothing. Nada. Like, literally empty. I think I have a couple water bottles and a can of Arizona tea. My freezer has some chocolate in it. But yeah, no actual food. And you know, I'm kind of broke, so I can't eat out. That's a little bit too much. Too much money, too much moolah. I've got none. In terms of Mora, we have no Mora. But yeah, as you can see, we have my little dinosaur dragon thing. I don't know what to call it. Anyways, he's wearing a little Sherlock hat that has a little Sherlock pipe. I think he's adorable. Again, thank you to Yuko for drawing the base of this Stegosaurus. I added the hat and stuff, but I could not make it this cute without it being so derpy like this in the first place. I love it. Anywho, I suppose you've had enough of me ranting on about my life and want to get to your very own personal audiobook. A Yukosaur? I suppose it is a Yukosaur. I mean, what else would it be? It's not exactly a dragon. It's when I commissioned it, I told her I wanted a Stegosaurus, and this is what I got. And I mean, it's a Stegosaurus. It's a dragon. It's a thing. It's cute. I love it. And I mean, that's what matters, right? It has exactly one brain cell, just like all of you guys, so I think it's pretty representative. Yeah. You silly little worms. Dinosaur, Stegosaurus thing. It's adorable. I could just eat it right up. Would go great with a glass of pure Karmotrine. Alright, well. Looks like A Study in Scarlet is about... Oh my god, this book is heavy. I'm gonna be looking down for most of this stream. There are 2 parts in a total of 68 pages. So, we'll see how far we get through it today. Be right back. I'm gonna go turn on my lamp light so I'm not reading in the dark. Well, yeah, Sherlock, it was originally not published as a book. They were published as serialized pieces because Sir Arthur Conan Doyle just was kind of publishing them for some money on the side. Sherlock Holmes was not his aspiration. He actually really did not like the series. He had other more serious non-fiction stuff that he was very serious about that never really caught on because, well, he's known for Sherlock Holmes now. But yeah, this was kind of a side gig just so he could make some extra cash. But it kind of blew up and became the Sherlock Holmes today that we know of today. As some of you might know, he actually killed off Sherlock at one point because he didn't want to write Sherlock Holmes stories anymore. So he dies in one of the stories, but everyone kind of wanted Sherlock back, so he caved into popular demand and wrote more Sherlock Holmes stories. But I'm grateful for that because I love Sherlock Holmes. He is so fucked up in the head, but I mean, so am I. Spoilers. I mean, this is just common knowledge. It's even if you watch like the Sherlock BBC show, he dies in the BBC show and comes back. It's part of popular Sherlock lore that he dies but doesn't really die. And if you remember the Sherlock show, there was this whole section where like a whole episode, and they're like, how did he die? I mean, not how did he die, how did he come back from being dead? And they had a bunch of different conspiracy theories about how he came back or how he faked his death. It was really funny. But yeah, A Study in Scarlet. Oh, there's an introduction to this volume. Let's read it. Who wrote this? Who wrote this introduction? The volume I have is this really pretty book, vintage looking, with a really nice cover and gold trimmed pages, published by Barnes & Noble. Let's see. I'm trying to find who wrote the intro. I don't think it says. Well. Let's read the introduction anyhow. I've never read the introduction. There seems little need to introduce Sherlock Holmes. You know what? Let's turn the music off. Wait, that's wrong button. There we go. No more BGM. So you can listen to my beautiful voice. There seems little need to introduce Sherlock Holmes, or the 60 stories about him written by Arthur Conan Doyle between 1886 and 1927. In the intervening decades, the character of Holmes, along with his companion and chronicler Dr. John H. Watson, has taken a life of its own and has become almost certainly the most famous character in all of fiction, readily identified even by people who have never read one of the stories. Translations of the Holmes tales have made the character recognizable in almost every country in the world. It has been claimed that the original stories have been translated into more languages than any other work save the Bible, with foreign language versions first appearing in Europe and Japan in the 1890s and spreading in an ever-widening circle in the following decades. The first Holmes film was made in 1900, and since then, the Great Detective has appeared in more movies than any other fictional character. There have been Sherlock Holmes stage plays, my eyes are closed, musicals and radio dramas, TV series, comics, graphic novels, cartoons, even a ballet. And let us not forget the hundreds of pastiches about Holmes and Watson written by writers other than Conan Doyle, written to satisfy the demands of readers who want more. Yeah, sorry, sometimes my brain and my mouth disconnects and I don't read what I read in my head. but such is the life of being me, I suppose. Such is Holmes's fame that even items associated with the detective have become a visual shorthand for mysteries, detection, and the solving of crimes. Think of the curved pipe, the deerstalker hat, and the magnifying glass, any of which one conjures up an image of Sherlock Holmes. Despite the fact that it appears nowhere in the original tales, the phrase "elementary, my dear Watson" has entered the language as an aphorism that suggests what is baffling to others is readily apparent to the speaker. Visitors to London still flock to Baker Street, hoping to see where Holmes lived, and for many years the occupants of the site where the detective's suite of rooms at 221B would have been fielded letters from around the world addressed to the great detective, many of them from people convinced that Holmes was a real person who would be able to help them. Indeed, so pervasive is the idea that Sherlock Holmes really lived that a poll carried out in 2008 by UK TV Gold revealed that 58% of the Britons surveyed believed Holmes was a real person. Wow, geez, I wish he was a real person. Imagine how amazing the world would be if Sherlock Holmes was a real person. Instead, you get people like me who have about 3.5 brain cells. 3.5 is quite a bit, though, if you think about it. With 3.5 brain cells, they can actually make synaptic connections. When you have one brain cell, as this little dinosaur over here, there's nothing to connect to. It's just one brain cell floating in the cerebral fluid. So, yeah, there's off track. What makes this popularity and longevity even more amazing? How long is this introduction? Oh my god, it goes on and on and on. Okay, I've had enough of this introduction. Oh, let me read this section though. This is what I was talking about earlier. What makes this popularity and longevity even more amazing is the fact that the Sherlock Holmes stories were written quickly and carelessly by their author, who felt that his literary fame would rest on other, more serious work. Conan Doyle was a born storyteller, partly, one must assume, through art in the blood, as Sherlock Holmes would have said it. He had a natural talent, yada yada yada, talking about his family. Gives a lot of background about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the actual study in Scarlet. Yeah, I feel like we're not gonna get that far because I keep getting distracted. It's already 15 minutes into a stream, and I've read exactly 0 pages of Study in Scarlet. Ah. Anyhow, A Study in Scarlet, Part 1. Being a reprint from the reminiscences of John H. Watson, M.D., late of the Army Medical Department. Chapter 1. Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In the year 1878, I took my degree of Doctor of Medicine of the University of London and proceeded to Netley to go through the course prescribed for surgeons in the Army. Having compiled my studies there, I was duly attached to the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers as assistant surgeon. The regiment was stationed in India at the time, and before I could join it, the Second Afghan War had broken out. On landing at Bombay, I learned that my corps had advanced through the passes and was already deep in the enemy's country. I followed, however, with many other officers who were in the same situation as myself, and succeeded in reaching Kandahar in safety, where I found my regiment and at once entered upon my new duties. The campaign brought honors and promotion to many, but for me had nothing but misfortune and disaster. I was removed from my brigade and attached to the Berkshires, with whom I served at the fatal Battle of Maiwand. There I was struck on the shoulder by... Oh my gosh, there are so many geographical and proper names, and I don't know how to pronounce them. Jezeel bullet, which shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. I should have fallen into the hands of the murderous Gotseys had it not been for the devotion and courage shown by Murray, my orderly, who threw me across the pack horse and succeeded in bringing me safely to the British liners. Worn with pain and weak from the prolonged hardships which I had... Oh wait, did I not turn off the reverb? I forgot to turn off the reverb. Alright. I am totally not Pone. Everything is according to Keikaku. Everything was planned. I make no mistakes. I make exactly 0.00 mistakes. 3 significant figures. Worn with pain and weak from the prolonged hardships which I had undergone, I was removed with a great train of wounded sufferers to the base hospital at Peshawar. Here I rallied and had already improved so far as to be able to walk about the wards, and even to bask a little upon the veranda when I was struck down by enteric fever, that curse of our Indian possessions. For months my life was despaired of, and when at last I came to myself and became convalescent, I was so weak and emaciated that a medical board determined that not a day should be lost in sending me back to England. I was dispatched accordingly in the troopship Orontes, and landed a month later on Portsmouth jetty with my health irretrievably ruined, but with permission from a paternal government to spend the next 9 months in attempting to improve it. I had neither kith nor kin in England, and was therefore as free as air, or as free as an income of 11 shillings and 6 pence a day will permit a man to be. Under such circumstances, I naturally gravitated to London, that great cesspool into which all the loungers and idlers of the empire are irresistibly drained. There I stayed for some time at a private hotel in the Strand, leading a comfortless, meaningless existence. Me for real. And spending such money as I had, considerably more freely than I ought. So alarmingly did the state of my finances become that I soon realized that I must either leave the metropolis and rusticate somewhere in the country, or that I must make a complete alteration in my style of living. Choosing the latter alternative, I began by making up my mind to leave the hotel and take up my quarters in some less pretentious and less expensive domicile. On the very day that I had come to this conclusion, I was standing at the Criterion bar when someone tapped me on the shoulder, and turning around I recognized young Stamford, who had been a dresser under me at Bart's. The sight of a friendly face in the great wilderness of London is a pleasant thing indeed to a lonely man. In old days, Stanford had never been a particular crony of mine, but now I hailed him with enthusiasm, and he, in his turn, appeared to be delighted to see me. In the exuberance of my joy, I asked him to lunch with me at the Holborn, and we started off together in a hansom. "Whatever have you been doing with yourself, Watson?" he asked, in an undisguised wonder, as we rattled through the crowded London streets. "You are as thin as a lathe and brown as a nut." I gave him a short sketch of my adventures, and had hardly concluded it by the time that we reached our destination. "Poor devil," he said, commiseratingly, after he had listened to my misfortunes. "What are you up to now?" "Looking for lodgings," I answered, "trying to solve the problem as to whether it is possible to get comfortable rooms at a reasonable price." "That's a strange thing," remarked my companion. "You're the second man today who has used that expression to me." "And who was the first?" I asked. "A fellow who was working at the chemical laboratory up at the hospital. He was bemoaning himself this morning because he could not get someone to go halves with him in some nice rooms he had found, and which were too much for his purse. 'By Jove,' I cried, 'if he really wants someone to share the rooms and the expense, I am the very man for him. I should prefer having a partner to be alone.'" As you might notice, one, I cannot mimic a British accent, so I will not try. And secondly, I have no theater experience, so I'm reading this as one would read a book and not voice act. Being able to voice act would be really nice, I think, but yeah, no. Maybe someday. Young Stanford looked rather strangely at me over his wineglass. "You don't know Sherlock Holmes yet," he said. "Perhaps you would not care for him as a constant companion." "Why? What is there against him?" "Oh, I didn't say there was anything against him. He is a little queer in his ideas, an enthusiast in some branches of science. As far as I know, he is a decent fellow enough." "A medical student, I suppose," said I. "No, I have no idea what he intends to go in for. I believe he is well up in anatomy, and he is a first-class chemist, but as far as I know, he has never taken out any systematic medical classes. His studies are very desultory and eccentric, but he has amassed a lot of out-of-the-way knowledge which would astonish his professors." "Did you never ask him what he was going in for?" I asked. "No, he is not a man that is easy to draw out, though he can be communicative enough when the fancy seizes him." "I should like to meet him," I said. "If I am to lodge with anyone, I should prefer a man of studious and quiet habits. I am not strong enough yet to stand much noise or excitement. I have had enough of both in Afghanistan to last me for the remainder of my natural existence. How can I meet this friend of yours?" "He is sure to be at the laboratory," returned my companion. "He either avoids the place for weeks, or else he works there from morning till night. If you like, we will drive round together after the luncheon." "Certainly," I said, and the conversation drifted away into other channels. As we made our way to the hospital after leaving the Holborn, Stanford gave me a few more particulars about the gentleman whom I proposed to take as a fellow lodger. "You mustn't blame me if you don't get on with him," he said. "I know nothing more of him than I have learned from meeting him occasionally in the laboratory. You proposed this arrangement, so you must not hold me responsible. If we don't get on in it, it will be easy to part company," I answered. "It seems to me, Stanford," I added, looking hardly at my companion, "that you have some reason for washing your hands of the matter. Is this fellow's temper so formidable, or what is it? Don't be mealy-mouthed about it." "It is not easy to express inexpressible," he answered with a laugh. "Holmes is a little too scientific for my tastes. It approaches to cold-bloodedness. I can imagine his friend... Bleh. I could imagine his giving a friend a little pinch of the latest vegetable alkaloid. Not out of malevolence, you understand, but simply out of a spirit of inquiry in order to have an accurate idea of the effects. To do him justice, I think that he would take it himself with the same readiness. He appears to have a passion for definite and exact knowledge. Very right, too. Yes, but it may be pushed to excess. When it comes to beating the subjects in the dissecting rooms with a stick, it is certainly taking rather a bizarre shape. Beating the subjects? Yes, to verify how far bruises may be produced after death. I saw him at it with my very own eyes. And yet you say he is not a medical student? No, heaven knows what the objects of his studies are. But here we are, and you must form your own impressions about him. As he spoke, we turned down a narrow lane and passed through a small side door, which opened into a wing of the great hospital. It was familiar ground to me, and I needed no guiding as we ascended the bleak stone staircase and made our way down the long corridor with its vista of whitewashed wall and dun-colored doors. Near the farther end, a low arched passage branched away from it and led to the chemical laboratory. This was a lofty chamber, lined and littered with countless bottles. Broad, low tables were scattered about, which bristled with retorts, test tubes, and little Bunsen lamps with their blue flickering flames. There was only one student in the room, who was bending over a distant table, absorbed in his work. At the sound of our steps, he glanced round and sprang to his feet with a cry of pleasure. "I found it! I found it!" he yelled to my companion, running towards us with the test tube in his hand. "I have found a reagent which is precipitated by hemoglobin and by nothing else." He had discovered a gold mine. Greater delight could not have shown upon his features. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," said Stamford, introducing us. "How are you?" he said cordially, gripping my hand with such strength for which I should have hardly given him credit. You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive." How on earth did you know that?" I asked him in astonishment. "Never mind," he had said, chuckling to himself. "The question now is about hemoglobin. No doubt you see the significance of this discovery of mine." "It is interesting chemically, no doubt," I answered, "but practically—" "Why, man, it is the most practical medical legal discovery for years. Don't you see that it gives us an infallible test for bloodstains? Come here now." He seized me by the coat sleeve in his eagerness and drew me over to the table at which he had been working. "Let us have some fresh blood," he said, digging a long bodkin into his finger and drawing off the resulting drop of blood in a chemical pipette. Now, I add this small quantity of blood to a liter of water. You perceive that the resulting mixture has the appearance of pure water. The proportion of blood can be more than 1 in a million. I have no doubt, however, that we shall be able to obtain the characteristic reaction." As he spoke, he threw into the vessel a few white crystals, and then added some drops of a transparent fluid. In an instant, the contents assumed a dull mahogany color, and a brownish dust was precipitated to the bottom of the glass jar. "Ha-ha!" he cried, clapping his hands and looking as delighted as a child with a new toy. "What do you think of that?" It seems to be a very delicate test," I remarked. "Beautiful, beautiful. The old Guiacum test was very clumsy and uncertain. So is the microscopic examination for blood corpuscles. The latter is valueless if the stains are a few hours old. Now this appears to act as well whether the blood is old or new. Had this test been invented, there are hundreds of men now working the earth who would have long ago paid the penalty of their crimes." "Indeed," I murmured. "Criminal cases are continually hinging upon that one point. A man is suspected of crime months, perhaps, after it's been discovered. His linen or clothes are examined and brownish stains are discovered upon them. Are they blood stains, or mud stains, or rust stains, or fruit stains, or what are they? That is a question which has puzzled many an expert, and why? Because there was no reliable test. Now we have the Sherlock Holmes test, and there will be no longer any difficulty." His eyes fairly glittered as he spoke, and he put his hand over his heart and bowed as if to some applauding crowd conjured by his imagination. Let me get some liquid. You are to be congratulated, I remarked, considerably surprised at his enthusiasm. There was the case of von Bonskiff at Frankfurt last year. He would certainly have been hung had this test been in existence. There was the case of Mason of Bradford, the notorious Moeller, and Lefebvre of Montpellier, and Samson of New Orleans. I could name a score of cases in which it would have been decisive. You seem to be a walking calendar of crimes, said Stanford with a laugh. You might start a paper on those lines. Call it the Police News of Past. Very interesting reading it might be made too, remarked Sherlock Holmes, sticking a small piece of plaster over the prick on his finger. I have to be careful, he continued, turning to me with a smile, for I dabble with poisons a good deal. He held out his hand as he spoke, and I noticed that it was all mottled over with similar pieces of plaster and discolored with strong acids. We came here on business, said Stamford, sitting down on a high three-legged stool and pushing another one in my direction with his foot. My friend here wants to take diggings, and as you were complaining that you could get no one to go halves with you, I thought that I had better bring you together. Sherlock Holmes seemed delighted at the idea of sharing his rooms with me. I have my eye on a suite in Baker Street, he said, which would suit us down to the ground. You don't mind if the smell of strong tobacco, I hope? I always smoke chips myself, I answered. That's good enough. I have chemicals about and occasionally do experiments. Will that annoy you? By no means. Let me see, what are my other shortcomings? I get in the dumps at times and don't open my mouth for days on end. You must not think I am sulky when I do that. Just let me alone and it'll soon be right. What I need to confess now? It's just as well for two fellows to know the worst of one another before they live together. I laughed at this cross-examination. I keep a bullpup, I said. And I object to rows because my nerves are shaken, and I get up at all sorts of ungodly hours, and I am extremely lazy. I have another set of vices when I am well, but those are the principal ones at present. Do you include violin playing in your category of rows? He asked anxiously. It depends on the player, I answered. I won't play violin as a treat for the gods. I badly played one. Oh, that's all right, he cried, with a merry laugh. I think we may consider the thing as settled, that is if the rooms are agreeable to you. When shall we see them? Call me here at noon tomorrow and we'll go together and settle everything, he answered. All right, noon exactly, said I, shaking his hand. We left him working among his chemicals, and we walked together towards my hotel. By the way, asked suddenly, stopping and turning upon Stamford, how the deuce did he know that I had come from Afghanistan? My companion smiled an enigmatical smile. That's just his little peculiarity, he said. A good many people have wanted to know how he finds things out. Oh, a mystery, is it? I cried, rubbing my hands. This is very piquant. How do I say this word? Piquant. Hello, Google. Piquant pronunciation. Piquant. Is that it? Interesting. It's like pecan, but not pecan. Where was I? I am much obliged to you for bringing us together. The proper study of mankind is man, you know. You must study him then, Stamford said as he bade me goodbye. You'll find him a knotty problem, though. I'll wager he learns more about you than you about him. Goodbye. Goodbye, I answered, and strolled on to my hotel, considerably interested by my new acquaintance. That is the end of chapter 1. So, some things I must confess. Not everything I read is going to be word for word what's written here. Disclaimer. Yeah, because when I read, sometimes, I don't know, my brain doesn't function right, and sometimes they get mixed up, and I'll read things in reverse order, Like sometimes I'll read he said instead of said he, or sometimes I'll skip over words, or sometimes my brain fills in the blanks faster than I'm actually reading. So I'll read by my acquaintance instead of in my acquaintance, which it's a problem. Yeah, that point 0.5 brain cell, I love it. It's what makes me function. My other three brain cells are there to sleeping, because I sleep a lot, but I don't get enough sleep. I need like I need 10 hours of sleep minimum to just not be a complete blob. And I need like 14 hours to function well. But who has time for that in this day and age? So I end up getting like 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and then I just don't function. And see if I can put my book on my laptop without it being like. I actually don't have to have my laptop right in front of me if I think about it. Let me push this back. Oh, my desk is full of shit. Move this here. I should hopefully make for a more comfortable reading experience for myself. Alright. Chapter 2, The Science of Deduction. We met we met next day as he had arranged and inspected the rooms at number 221B Baker Street, of which he had spoken at our meeting. They consisted of a couple of comfortable bedrooms and a single large airy sitting room, cheerfully furnished and illuminated by two broad windows. So desirable in every way were the apartments, and so moderate did the terms seem when divided between us, that the bargain was concluded upon the spot, and we at once entered into possession. That very evening I moved my things round from the hotel, and the following morning Sherlock Holmes followed me with several boxes and portmanteaus. For a day or two we were busily employed in unpacking and laying out our property to the best advantage. That done, we gradually began to settle down and to accommodate ourselves to our new surroundings. Holmes was certainly not a difficult man to live with. He was quiet in his ways, and his habits were regular. It was rare for him to be up after 10 at night, and and, and he had invariably breakfasted and gone out before I rose in the morning. Sometimes he spent his day at the chemical laboratory. Let me move this mic closer. You all can still hear me, right? Hear my beautiful voice? I have a cheap ass microphone, so I can't adjust the gain. Sometimes he spent his day at the chemical laboratory, sometimes in the dissecting rooms, and occasionally in long walks which appeared to take him into the lowest portions of the city. Nothing could exceed his energy when the working fit was upon him, but now and again a reaction would seize him, and for days on end he would lie upon the sofa in the sitting room, hardly uttering a word or moving a muscle from morning to night. I still have reverb? Are you fucking kidding me? Ugh. Come on. Alright, is the reverb off? I can't believe I read 8 pages to you guys with reverb. Come on. No. I wonder if it's just my microphone. Because I literally turned the reverb filter off. Dude. This is what I get for being broke. You can't have nice things when you're broke. It's gone? Weird. Bro. 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 This is the definition of High tech, low life, but without high tech. Cyberpunk my ass. Ah, where was I? Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes. Nothing could exceed his energy when the working fit was upon him. No, I already read that. On these occasions, I have noticed such a dreamy, vacant expression in his eyes that I might have suspected him of being addicted to the use of some narcotic, had not the temperance and cleanliness of his whole life forbidden such a notion. Little did Watson know. As the weeks went by, my interest in him and my curiosity as to his aims in life gradually deepened and increased. His very person and appearance were such as to strike the attention of the most casual observer. In height, he was rather over 6 feet, and so excessively lean that he seemed to be considerably taller. His eyes were sharp and piercing, save during those intervals of torpor which I have alluded. And his thin, hawk-like nose gave his whole expression an air of alertness and decision. His chin, too, had the prominence and squareness which marked the man of determination. His hands were invariably blotted with ink and stained with chemicals, yet he was possessed of extraordinary delicacy of touch, as I frequently had occasion to observe when I watched him manipulating his fragile philosophical instruments. The reader may set me down as a hopeless busybody when I confess how much this man stimulated my curiosity, and how often I endeavored to break through the reticence which he showed on all that concerned himself. Before pronouncing judgment, however, be it remembered how objectless was my life, and how little there was to engage my attention. My health forbade me from venturing out unless the weather was exceptionally genial, and I had no friends who would call upon me and break the monotony of my daily existence. Under these circumstances, I eagerly hailed the little mystery which hung about my companion, and spent much of my time in endeavoring to unravel it. He was not studying medicine. He had himself, in reply to a question, confirmed Stanford's opinion at that point. Neither did he appear to have pursued any course of reading which might fit him for a degree, in science or any other recognized portal, which would have given him an entrance into the learned world. Yet his zeal for the certain studies was remarkable, and within eccentric limits his knowledge was so extraordinarily ample and minute that his observations have fairly astounded me. Surely no man would work so hard or retain such precise information unless he had some definite end in view. Desultory readers are seldom remarkable for the exactness of their learning. No man burdens his mind with small matters unless he has some very good reason for doing so. His ignorance was as remarkable as his knowledge. Of contemporary literature, philosophy, and politics, he appeared to know next to nothing. Upon my quoting Thomas Carlyle, he inquired in the naivest way who he might be and what he had done. My surprise reached a climax, however, when I found incidentally he was ignorant of the Copernican theory and of the composition of the solar system. That any civilized human being in the 19th century should not be aware that the earth traveled round the sun appeared to me to be such an extraordinary feat that I could hardly realize it. You appear to be astonished, he said, smiling at my expression of surprise. Now that I do know it, I shall do my best to forget it. To forget it? You see, he explained. I consider that a man's brain originally is like a little empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. A fool takes in a lumber of every sort that he comes across, so that the knowledge which might be useful to him gets crowded out, or at best jumbled up with a lot of other things, so that he has difficulty in laying his hands upon it. Now, the skilled workman is very careful indeed as to what he takes into his brain attic. He will have nothing but the tools which may help him in doing his work, but of these he has a large assortment, and all in the most perfect order. It is a mistake to think that little room has elastic walls and can descend into any extent. Depend upon it, there comes a time when for every addition of knowledge you forget something that you knew before. It is of the highest importance, therefore, not to have useless facts elbowing out the useful ones. The solar system, I protested. What the deuce is this to me? He interrupted impatiently. You see that we go round the sun. If we went round the moon, it would not make a penny worth of difference to me or my work. I was on the point of asking him what that work might be, but something in his manner showed me that the question would be an unwelcome one. I pondered over our short conversation, however, and endeavored to draw my deductions from it. He said that he would acquire no knowledge which did not bear upon his object. Therefore, all the knowledge which he possessed was such as would be useful to him. I enumerated in my own mind all the various points upon which he had shown me that he was exceptionally well informed. I even took a pencil and jotted them down. I cannot help smiling at the document when I had completed it. It ran in this way: Sherlock Holmes, his limits. 1. Knowledge of literature, nil. 2. Knowledge of philosophy, nil. 3. Knowledge of astronomy, nil. 4. Knowledge of politics, feeble. 5. Knowledge of botany, variable. Well up in belladonna, opium, and poisons generally. Knows nothing of practical gardening. 6. Knowledge of geology, practical but limited. Tells at a glance different soils from each other. 1 second. After walks has shown me splashes upon his trousers, and told me by their color and consistence in what part of London he had received them. 7. Knowledge of chemistry, profound. 8. Knowledge of anatomy, accurate but unsystematic. 9. Knowledge of sensational literature, immense. He appears to know every detail of every horror perpetrated in the century. 10. Plays the violin well. 11. Is an expert single-stick player, boxman, and swordsman. 12. Has a good practical knowledge of British law. When I had got so far in my list, I threw it into the fire in despair. If I can only find what the fellow is driving at by reconciling all these accomplishments, and discovering a calling which needs them all, I said to myself, I might as well give up the attempt at once. I see that I have alluded above to his powers upon the violin. These were very remarkable, but as eccentric as all his other accomplishments. That he could play pieces and difficult pieces I knew well, because at my request he has played me some of Mendelssohn's Lieder and other favorites. When left to himself, however, he would seldom produce any music or attempt any recognized air. Leaning back in his armchair of an evening, he would close his eyes and scrape carelessly at the fiddle which was thrown across his knee. Sometimes the chords were sonorous and melancholy. Occasionally, they were fantastic and cheerful. Clearly, they reflected the thoughts which possessed him, but whether the music aided those thoughts, or whether the playing was simply the result of a whim or fancy, was more than I could determine. I might have rebelled against these exasperating solos had it not been that he usually terminated them by playing in quick succession a whole series of my favorite airs as a slight compensation for the trials upon my patience. During the first week or so, we had no callers, and I had begun to think that my companion was as friendless a man as I was myself. Presently, however, I found that he had many acquaintances, and those in the most different classes of society. There was one little sallow, rat-faced, dark-eyed fellow who was introduced to me as Mr. Lestrade, and who came 3 or 4 times in a single week. One morning a young girl called, fashionably dressed, and stayed for half an hour or more. That same afternoon brought a gray-headed, seedy visitor, looking like a Jew peddler, who appeared to me to be much excited, and who was closely followed by a slipshod elderly woman. On another occasion, an old white-haired gentleman had an interview with my companion, and on another, a railway porter in his velveteen uniform. When any of these nondescript individuals put in an appearance, Sherlock Holmes used to beg for the use of the sitting room, and I would retire to my bedroom. He always apologized to me for putting me to this inconvenience. I have to use this room as a place of business, he said, and these people are my clients. Again, I had an opportunity of asking him a point-blank question, and again my delicacy prevented me from forcing another man to confide in me. I imagined at the time that he had some strong reason for not alluding to it, but he soon dispelled the idea by coming round to the subject of his own accord. Boy, reading takes a much bigger toll on your voice than I thought it would. Let me get some liquid. When I came into the stream, I was like, hey, easy stream. I'm just gonna sit here and read, right? But no, in some respects, it's actually harder than singing. Because with singing, I mean, if you practice the song, you know where to pause and take breaths, right? You inhale, make sure that you have good breath support in your diaphragm, and then you breathe out as you sing. But now that I'm reading, and especially because I have gamer posture, there's no breath support. I'm just, it goes on, and man, yeah. So I think the reading of this book will probably not go as. Oh my god, it's been an hour? Oh my god. Water. Water. Dragons don't drink water. We drink Arizona iced tea because it's cheap. And if we feel like splurging, we get really nice tea. Milk tea, tea without milk, black teas, English breakfast, Earl Grey, Assam, oolongs, green teas, sencha, matcha, Hojicha, Genmaicha. I'm not a water dragon though. I actually don't know what kind of dragon I am. I left the dragon dimension pretty early. I was kicked out because I just spent it all sleeping and they were like, get a job. So I came to Earth when it was just a little rock covered in water and lava. Literally Minecraft. And there were like cells and plants and shit. Precambrian stuff. That's right. There wasn't even fish yet. Not even ammonites or other stuff. I, what was I talking about again? C418. I don't think I have. I wasn't paying attention. I spent most of my time sleeping. Sleeping through the eras. Ah, I actually missed the Cambrian explosion. By the time I woke up, it was the Devonian era. The book is very long. I'm on page 10, and the study in Scarlet itself is like 60 pages. We're not even gonna finish part 1 today. Let's see how long is chapter 2 and chapter 3. Let's read to, let's finish chapter 2. Chapter 2 isn't that much longer. And we might read a couple pages of chapter 3, but we're not going to finish chapter 3 today. I might do some other things like sing, because honestly, singing will actually help soothe my voice a bit. And yeah, I don't have any games prepared. Next time maybe I'll do like a combined stream of reading and playing games because I want to spend more time with all of you, you know? Just only spending an hour with you guys is not very long. Would be nice to play some games. Ugh, more Arizona tea. Alright, now I gotta find where I was. It was upon the 4th of March, as I have good reason to remember, that I rose somewhat earlier than usual, and found that Sherlock Holmes had not yet finished his breakfast. The landlady had become so accustomed to my late habits that my place had not been laid nor my coffee prepared. With the unreasonable petulance of mankind, I rang the bell and gave a curt intimation that I was ready. Then I picked up a magazine from the table and attempted to while away the time with it, while my companion munched silently at his toast. One of the articles had a pencil mark at the heading, and I naturally began to run my eye through it. Its somewhat ambitious title was The Book of Life, and it attempted to show how much an observant man might learn by an accurate and systematic examination of all that came his way. It struck me as being a remarkable mixture of shrewdness and of absurdity. The reasoning was close and intense, but the deductions appeared to me to be far-fetched and exaggerated. The writer claimed by a momentary expression, a twitch of a muscle or a glance of an eye, to fathom the man's most innermost thoughts. Deceit, according to him, was an impossibility in the case of one trained to observation and analysis. His conclusions were as infallible as so many propositions of Euclid. So startling would his results appear to the uninitiated that until they learned of the processes by which he had arrived at them, they might well consider him a necromancer. From a drop of water, said the writer, a logician could infer the possibility of an Atlantic or a Niagara without having seen or heard of one or the other. So all life is a great chain, the nature of which is known whenever we are shown a single link of it. Like all other arts, the science of deduction and analysis is one which can only be acquired by long and patient study. Nor is life long enough to allow any mortal to attain the highest possible perfection in it. Before turning to those moral and mental aspects of the matter which present the greatest difficulties, let the inquirer begin by mastering more elementary problems. Let him, on meeting a fellow mortal, learn at a glance to distinguish the history of the man and the trade or profession to which he belongs. Puerile as such an exercise may seem, it sharpens the faculties of the observation and teaches one where to look and what to look for. By a man's fingernails, by his coat sleeve, by his boots, by his trouser knees, by the calicites of his forefinger and thumb, by his expression, by his shirt cuffs. By each of these things, a man's calling is plainly revealed. That all united should fail to enlighten the competent inquirer in any case is almost inconceivable. What ineffable twaddle! I cried, slapping the magazine down on the table. I never read such rubbish in my life. What is it? Said Sherlock Holmes. Why, this article, I said, pointing at it with my egg spoon as I sat down to my breakfast. I see that you have read it since you have marked it. I don't deny that it is smartly written. It irritates me, though. It is evidently the theory of some armchair lounger who evolves all these neat little paradoxes in the seclusion of his own study. It is not practical. I should like to see him clapped down in a third-class carriage on the underground, and asked to give the trades of all his fellow travelers. I would lay 1,000 to 1 against him. You would lose your money, Holmes remarked calmly. As for the article, I wrote it myself. You? Yes, I have returned both for observation and for deduction. The theories which I have expressed there, and which appear to you to be so chimerical, are really extremely practical, so practical that I depend upon them for my bread and cheese. And how? I asked involuntarily. Well, I have a trade on my own. I suppose I am the only one in the world. I'm a consulting detective, you can understand what that is. Here in London, we have lots of government detectives and lots of private ones. When these fellows are at fault, they come to me and I manage to put them on the right scent. They lay all the evidence before me and I am generally able, by the help of my knowledge and the history of the crime, to set them straight. There is a strong family resemblance about misdeeds, and if you have all the details of 1,000 at your finger ends, it is odd if you can't unravel the 1,001st. Lestrade is a well-known detective. He got himself into a fog recently over a forgery case, and that was what brought him here. I'm trying to make Sherlock Holmes talk quickly, and as you can see, I am stumbling over my own tongue. Well, and these other people, they are mostly sent on by private inquiry agencies. They are all people who are in trouble about something and want a little enlightening. I listen to their story, they listen to my comments, and then I pocket the fee. What do you mean to say, I said, that without leaving your room, you can unravel some knot which other men can make nothing of, although they have seen every detail for themselves? Quite so. I have a kind of intuition that way. Now and again, a case turns up which is a little more complex. Then I have to bustle about and see things with my own eyes. You see, I have a lot of special knowledge which I apply to the problem, and which facilitates matters wonderfully. Those rules of deduction laid down in that article which arouse your scorn are invaluable to me in my practical work. Observation with me is my second nature. You appeared to be surprised when I told you on our first meeting that you had come from Afghanistan. You were told, no doubt. Nothing of the sort. I knew you came from Afghanistan. From long habit, the train of thoughts ran so swiftly through my mind that I arrived at the conclusion without being conscious of intermediate steps. There were such steps, however. The train of reasoning ran. Here is a gentleman of a medical type, but with the air of a military man. Clearly an army doctor, then. He has just come from the tropics, for his face is dark, and that is not the natural tint of his skin, for his wrists are fair. He has undergone hardship and sickness, as his haggard face says clearly. His left arm has been injured. He holds it in a stiff and unnatural manner. Where in the tropics could an English army doctor have seen so much hardship and got his arm wounded? Clearly in Afghanistan. The whole train of thought did not occupy a second. I then remarked that you came from Afghanistan and you were astonished. It is simple enough as you explain it, I said, smiling. You remind me of Edgar Allan Poe's Dupin. I had no idea such an individuals existed outside of stories. Sherlock Holmes rose and lit his pipe. No doubt you think that you are complimenting me in comparing me to Dupin, he observed. Now, in my opinion, Dupin was a very inferior fellow. That trick of his of breaking in on his friends' thoughts was an apropos remark after a quarter of an hour's silence is really very showy and superficial. He has some analytical genius, no doubt, but he was by no means such a phenomenon as Poe appeared to imagine. Have you read Gaboriau's works? I asked. Does Lecoq come up to your idea of a detective? Sherlock Holmes sniffed sardonically. Lecoq was a miserable bungler, he said, in an angry voice. He had only one thing to recommend him, and that was his energy. That book made me positively ill. The question was how to identify an unknown prisoner. I could have done it in 24 hours. Lecoq took 6 months or so. It might be made a textbook for the detectives to teach them what to avoid. I felt rather indignant at having two characters whom I had admired treated in this cavalier style. I walked over to the window and stood looking out into the busy street. This fellow may be very clever, I said to myself, but he is certainly very conceited. There are no crimes and no criminals in these days, he said, curiously, querulously. What is the use of having brains in a profession? I know well that I have it in me to make my name famous. No man lives or has ever lived who has brought the same amount of study and of natural talent to the detection of crime which I have done. And what is the result? There is no crime to detect, or, at most, some bungling villainy with a motive so transparent that even a Scotland Yard official can see through it. I was still annoyed at his bumptious style of conversation. I thought it best to change the topic. I wonder what that fellow was looking for, I asked, pointing to a stalwart, plainly dressed individual who was walking slowly down the other side of the street, looking anxiously at the numbers. He had a large blue envelope in hand and was evidently the bearer of a message. You mean the retired sergeant of Marines, said Sherlock Holmes. Brag and bounce, I thought to myself. He knows that I cannot verify his guess. The thought had hardly passed through my mind when the man whom we were watching caught sight of the number on our door and ran rapidly across the roadway. We heard a loud knock, a deep voice below, and the heavy steps ascended the stair. For Mr. Sherlock Holmes, he said, stepping into the room and handing my friend the letter. Here was an opportunity of taking the conceit out of him. He little thought of this when he made that random shot. May I ask, my lad, I said, in the blandest voice, what your trade might be? Commissionaire, sir, he said gruffly. Uniform away for repairs. And you were? I asked, with a slightly malicious glance at my companion. A sergeant, sir. Royal Marine Light Infantry, sir. No answer? Right, sir. He clicked his heels together, raised his hand in salute, and was gone. And that is chapter 2. Ah, my throat. It doesn't hurt, but it's tired, you know? I can't hear I'm not listening to my own voice through the mic right now. So I don't know if you can hear, but my voice is getting so much more scratchy than when I started this stream. Uh, well, yeah, that is the beginning of Sherlock Holmes, Study in Scarlet. We haven't even finished part 1 yet, but we're probably gonna stop the reading for there. Um, I wonder if there's any games I can stream. 1 second, what's pinged on Discord? Okay, not relevant. Um, I didn't prepare any games, so I can't think of anything. Let me see what I have on Steam. Steam. Um, you know what? Maybe we'll just end it early for today. Next time, I'll make sure to prepare something. Yeah, I would have taken suggestions from chat, but there's only a couple of us here right now, so I think we'll leave it off to that for today. Thank you for coming. I hope you had a good time. I know I stumbled a bit. I am working on articulating my consonants because I know that I sometimes leave them off, especially when the word ends with a T or a D. I just very lightly tap my tongue across my mouth instead of the enunciating. Thank you. I'm glad you had fun. Well, I hope I'll see you all next week. Unless something extreme happens on my end, I will be here for you guys every single Saturday at 11 p.m. EST. So if you if you if you're not here, shout out to VOD Gang. Hope you'll have fun listening to me read Sherlock Holmes. And if you enjoy my stuff so far, or my potential, please tell your friends. I will always be glad to have more people here to hang out with. Um, and thank you. See you next week.